Somewhere right now, a man is standing in a house he spent 20 years building. Marble floors, a view that people drive hours just to photograph, and he is miserable, not because something went wrong, because nothing did. He got everything he asked for, and the asking never stopped. This is the strange trap almost nobody warns you about. Happiness doesn't run out because you failed to get what you want. It runs out the moment you get it, and your mind quietly starts wanting the next thing before you've even finished unwrapping this one. For most of your life, you've probably been told that happiness is a destination. Get the job, and you'll feel it. Get the relationship, and you'll feel it. Get the body, the income, the recognition, and finally, you'll feel it. But if you're honest with yourself, you already know how that story ends. You get the thing, you feel good for a while, and then, almost without noticing, the feeling fades back to baseline, and you're already scanning the horizon for the next target. The ancient Stoics noticed this pattern over 2,000 years before psychologists gave it a name. They watched emperors who owned the known world and still woke up anxious. They watched slaves who owned nothing and still slept in peace. And they asked a question that should unsettle you a little. What if happiness was never about what you have, or what happens to you, but about a set of small, repeatable choices you make every single day? Today you'll discover the 10 daily Stoic habits that build lasting happiness, habits practiced by some of the most powerful and most persecuted men in history, from a Roman emperor who ruled the world to a man who was once literally owned by another. What they built wasn't luck, it was a system. And by the end of this video, you'll have that same system in your hands. Welcome to Stoic Forge Explained, where ancient Stoic wisdom meets modern life to help you become calmer, stronger, and mentally unbreakable. Before we get into the habits themselves, we need to talk about the mistake almost everyone makes when chasing happiness. Because if you don't understand the mistake, no habit on this list will stick. Most people chase happiness incorrectly. Picture two people standing at the base of the same mountain. The first believes happiness is at the summit. Every step is just a means to an end, something to endure until the view finally makes it worth it. The second person believes happiness is in the walking itself, the rhythm of breath, the changing light, the quiet conversation with a friend beside them. Only one of these people can be disappointed. If happiness is the summit, then every single day before reaching it is, by definition, a day without happiness. And even worse, the moment they arrive, the summit stops being special. It becomes just another patch of ground. This is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, our remarkable, maddening ability to get used to almost anything, good or bad, until it no longer moves us. The Stoics understood this centuries before it had a clinical name. They didn't say stop wanting things. They said something far more precise. Stop placing your happiness in things you don't control. A promotion depends on other people's decisions. A relationship depends on someone else's choices. Even your own health depends partly on genetics and chance. If you build your happiness on top of any of these, you've built a house on a foundation that was never yours to control in the first place. So where does lasting happiness actually come from? According to the Stoics, it comes from your character, your judgments, your daily choices about how you respond to what life hands you. That might sound abstract right now, almost like a nice idea for a poster on a wall. But over the next several minutes, you're going to see exactly how this idea becomes a lived, practical, repeatable system. 10 habits, each one small enough to start today, and powerful enough to reshape the rest of your life. Most people overlook the first one entirely because it sounds, at first, like the opposite of happiness. Not tough. The Epictetus, the art of imagining loss. There's a strange exercise the wealthiest Stoic in Rome performed every single morning, and it wasn't counting his fortune. Seneca, tutor to an emperor and one of the richest men of his era, would sit quietly and imagine losing everything: his villas, his reputation, his freedom. He would picture in vivid detail exile, poverty, even death. To modern ears, this sounds bleak, even morbid. But Seneca wasn't trying to make himself miserable. He was trying to do the opposite. The Stoics called this premeditatio malorum, the premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of misfortunes. And the psychology behind it is now backed by decades of research. Our brains have a design flaw called the hedonic treadmill. We adapt so completely to what we already have that we stop noticing it, the same way you stop smelling a scent after being in a room for 10 minutes. The furniture, the working legs, the people who still answer your calls. All of it fades into invisible background noise. By briefly imagining its absence, Seneca woke that noise back up into feeling. He'd finish the exercise, open his eyes, look around his home, and feel a jolt of genuine gratitude for the ordinary walls still standing around him. This wasn't pessimism. It was a rehearsal that made the present moment visible again. Here's how this plays out in an ordinary life today. Picture a woman rushing through her morning, irritated that her coffee machine is being slow, irritated that her son can't find his shoes, irritated that the drive to work is going to make her 5 minutes late. Every one of these irritations assumes a version of life where coffee machines, suns, and cars are simply owed to her, a baseline she's entitled to. Now imagine she spends 60 seconds the night before picturing a morning without any of it. The house silent, no small feet stomping down the stairs. Suddenly, he can't find his shoes isn't an annoyance. It's evidence that he's there at all. The practical action is simple enough to do tonight. Before bed, spend 2 quiet minutes imagining one thing you currently have. A person, your health, your job, even just your ability to walk to the kitchen. Completely gone. Don't dwell in despair. Just let the imagined loss make the real thing visible again. Then, let it go. This single habit alone can quietly restore color to a life that's gone gray from familiarity. But imagining loss only prepares the soil. What you plant in that soil next is where things get interesting, because the second habit isn't about your possessions at all. It's about something far more dangerous to lose control of, your own reactions. Notch point forestry. Have it too. Draw the line between what's yours and what isn't. In the 1st century, there lived a man named Epictetus who began life as a slave, was crippled, likely by a cruel master, and yet later ran one of the most respected philosophy schools in the ancient world. Free men traveled great distances to learn from someone who owned nothing and had once been owned himself. His secret wasn't a technique for getting more. It was a single, radical distinction that changed everything about how he suffered, or didn't. Epictetus taught that everything in existence falls into exactly 2 categories. Things up to us, our judgments, our intentions, our reactions, our effort, and things not up to us, other people's opinions, the weather, our reputation, the outcome of events we've already done our best on. Nearly all human misery, he argued, comes from confusing the 2. We suffer not because bad things happen, but because we mistakenly believe we control things we never actually did. Modern psychology has essentially rediscovered this insight and given it a name: the locus of control. People who believe their well-being depends primarily on external, uncontrollable events report significantly higher anxiety and lower life satisfaction than people who focus their energy on their own responses and choices. Epictetus figured this out without a single research study, sitting in a rented room, having already lost more control over his external life than most of us will ever face. Think about the last time you were cut off in traffic. Your jaw tightened. Your hand may have hit the horn before your brain even finished processing what happened. In that half second, you handed a total stranger the power to ruin your next 20 minutes. They didn't take that power. You gave it to them, instantly and for free. Now picture the same moment handled differently. The car cuts you off. You notice the flash of anger rising, and instead of following it, you simply observe it. That's not up to me. My response is, you take a breath. The moment passes through you instead of lodging inside you. Nothing about the external event changed. Everything about your experience of it did. The practical action here is a daily filter you can start using immediately. Whenever you feel a spike of frustration, anxiety, or disappointment today, pause and silently ask one question: is this actually up to me? If it isn't, the traffic, someone's opinion of you, the outcome of an interview you've already finished, consciously release your grip on it. If it is, your effort, your tone, your next decision, pour your energy there instead. This habit alone will change how loud the world feels. But knowing what's within your control is only half the equation. The other half is remembering to actually look, because most people go entire days without ever stopping to notice their own mind at work. That's where the next habit comes in, and it's the one Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man alive in his era, refused to skip even once. Habit 3. Each day by meeting yourself. Honestly, Marcus Aurelius commanded legions. He governed an empire stretching across 3 continents, and every single night, by candlelight, exhausted from a day most of us can't imagine, he sat down and wrote to himself, not for an audience, not even, as far as historians can tell, with any intention of publishing. Those private notebooks eventually became the book we now call Meditations. But to Marcus, they were simply an evening ritual, a place to ask himself the questions that mattered. Where did I fall short of the person I intend to be today? Where did I act with patience I'm proud of? What am I still carrying that I need to put down before sleep? This wasn't self-punishment. Seneca, writing separately about the same practice, described examining his own day the way a lenient judge examines a friend, honestly but without cruelty. The goal was never guilt. It was awareness. You cannot correct a pattern you've never noticed, and most people go their entire lives on autopilot, reacting the same way to the same triggers, never once stepping back to actually observe the shape of their own behavior. This connects to something psychologists now call the observing self, the part of your mind capable of watching your other thoughts and reactions from a slight distance, rather than being completely fused with them. People who regularly practice this kind of reflective self-observation show measurably better emotional regulation. They catch the spiral before it becomes a landslide because they've built the habit of checking in. Consider someone who snapped at their partner over something trivial, a dish left in the sink, a wrong turn on the highway. Without reflection, that moment simply vanishes into the pile of forgotten reactions, ready to repeat itself tomorrow under a different disguise. But if that same person spends 90 seconds before bed simply asking, "Why did that bother me so much?" often the real answer isn't the dish at all. It's exhaustion, stress from work, a fear of not being appreciated. Once seen, that root can actually be addressed. Left unseen, it just keeps disguising itself as anger about dishes. The practical action is a nightly ritual you can begin tonight, and it takes less time than scrolling through one more video. Ask yourself 3 questions before you close your eyes. What did I do well today? Where did I let a lower impulse win? What is one thing I'll do differently tomorrow? Write the answers down if you can. Even 3 lines in a phone note counts. This habit builds the muscle of self-awareness. But awareness alone doesn't make you resilient. You also need to know that you can actually handle hardship when it arrives uninvited, and that requires a habit most people actively avoid, because on the surface, it looks like the opposite of comfort. Habit 4. Toast discomfort on purpose. Seneca, despite his wealth, would occasionally set aside days to eat the plainest food, wear the coarsest clothing, and sleep on the hardest surface in his home. Not because he'd lost his fortune, because he wanted to know with certainty that poverty couldn't frighten him anymore. His reasoning was sharp and practical. It's easy to fear something you've never actually tested. We build entire monsters in our imagination out of hardships we've never touched. But the moment you voluntarily walk into mild versions of your fears and discover you survive them, even thrive through them, the fear loses most of its grip. What terrifies you in theory becomes manageable in practice. Modern psychology calls this stress inoculation, and it's now used deliberately in everything from athletic training to cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety. Controlled, voluntary exposure to manageable discomfort builds a kind of psychological callus. You don't become numb to hardship, you become confident in your ability to move through it. This shows up in surprisingly small places. Someone who takes a genuinely cold shower every morning isn't doing it for the shower itself. They're doing it because at 6 a.m., half asleep, their entire body is screaming at them to stop, and they don't. They finish it anyway. That 30-second act of following through on discomfort quietly whispers something to the rest of the day. I do hard things. I keep my word to myself. That whisper carries into the difficult conversation at work, the workout they didn't feel like doing, the temptation they resisted. Notice this isn't about suffering for its own sake. The Stoics weren't masochists. The goal was never pain. It was proof gathered firsthand, that you are sturdier than your fears assume you are. The practical action can start small tonight or tomorrow morning. Skip one comfort you normally reach for automatically, the extra blanket, the elevator instead of the stairs. The second helping you don't actually need. Notice the discomfort. Notice that you survive it completely intact. Let that evidence build, one small voluntary hardship at a time. Once you know you can handle discomfort, something remarkable becomes possible. You can start looking directly at your problems instead of flinching from them. And that leads to what might be the most famous piece of Stoic wisdom in existence. One Marcus Aurelius wrote in a single quiet sentence that changed how millions of people since have faced their worst days. Chabad 5, turn every obstacle into fuel. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Marcus Aurelius wrote that line during one of the most difficult stretches of his reign. Plague sweeping the empire, war on multiple fronts, betrayal from people he trusted. He wasn't writing poetry for a wall hanging. He was talking himself through an actual crisis in real time, using a mental reframe that Stoics had practiced for centuries before him. The idea is deceptively simple. An obstacle only blocks the specific path you originally intended. It never blocks your ability to respond well. A rock in the road stops you from walking straight through it, but it doesn't stop you from climbing over it, going around it, or, in some cases, using it as a step up to somewhere higher than you were originally headed. The obstacle changes the route. It doesn't have to change the outcome. This is cognitive reframing, one of the most well-documented tools in modern psychology, and it works precisely because your brain doesn't experience raw events. It experiences your interpretation of events. Two people can lose the same job on the same day. One collapses into months of despair, certain their career is over. The other, within a week, is treating it as the exact push they needed to finally start the business they'd been too comfortable to attempt. Same event, completely different trajectory. The difference wasn't luck, it was the frame. Imagine a young man rejected from the graduate program he'd built his entire identity around. For weeks, that rejection feels like the end of the story. But a year later, forced by that closed door to take a job he never would have considered, he discovers work he's genuinely gifted at, work the original path would have kept him from ever finding. The obstacle didn't ruin his story. It rewrote it and arguably improved it. None of this means obstacles feel good in the moment. Stoicism was never about pretending pain isn't real. It's about refusing to let pain be the final word before you've even asked what it might be teaching you or opening for you. The practical action: the next time something goes wrong today, even something small, a canceled plan, a mistake at work, pause and ask one reframing question. What does this obstacle make possible that wasn't possible before? You won't always find an answer immediately, but the habit of asking rewires how your mind meets difficulty, over time turning you into someone obstacles fuel instead of someone they flatten. But the next habit changes everything about how heavy your daily life actually feels. Because most people are carrying a weight they don't even realize they've picked up. 48 stop, time stop. Start each morning by naming what's already enough. Before Marcus Aurelius stepped out of bed each morning to face an empire's worth of problems, he reportedly reminded himself of something first: that he would meet ungrateful people, difficult people, unfair people that day, and that this was simply the nature of things, not a personal insult from the universe. But layered underneath that famous passage is a quieter habit many Stoics practiced, beginning the day by mentally listing what was already, at that very moment, sufficient. Not what they hoped to acquire, what they already possessed. Health enough to rise, a mind capable of reason, people in their life worth caring about. This directly counters what researchers now call the negativity bias, our brain's evolutionary tendency to scan for threats and problems far more actively than it scans for what's already going well. This bias kept our ancestors alive around predators and cliffs. In a modern life largely free of lions, it just keeps us anxious about emails and mildly annoyed at slow traffic. Left unchecked, it quietly convinces you that your life is a series of problems with occasional good moments, when for most people, it's closer to the reverse. Gratitude practices, studied extensively over the past 2 decades, consistently show measurable increases in life satisfaction and measurable decreases in depressive symptoms, but only when practiced specifically, not vaguely. I'm grateful for my family produces a small effect. I'm grateful my daughter left a drawing on my desk before school, even though it means I'll be finding crayon marks on the wall for a month. produces a far larger one, because specificity forces your attention to actually land on something real instead of gliding past an abstraction. Picture a man who wakes up already irritated. Bad night's sleep, a long list of tasks, a body that aches slightly more than it used to. If his first conscious thought is another exhausting day, his brain obediently spends the day collecting evidence to prove him right. But if he instead spends 60 seconds naming 3 specific, ordinary things already true and good, the coffee is hot, the dog is thrilled to see him, his knees still carry him downstairs, his brain starts the day scanning for confirmation of a completely different story. The practical action: before checking your phone tomorrow morning, name 3 specific things that are already true and good in your life. Not hopes, not goals. Things already, currently sufficient. Say them out loud if you can. Let your first mental motion of the day be toward what you have, not what's missing. Most people completely overlook this habit because it feels too simple to matter. But simplicity was never a Stoic weakness. It was the entire point, and it leads directly into the next habit, which asks a harder question: what happens when gratitude runs headfirst into genuine anger? Habit 7. Let the first wave pass before you speak. Seneca once wrote an entire book on anger, calling it a temporary madness, because in the moment it takes hold, it genuinely does hijack the parts of your brain responsible for judgment and impulse control. His advice wasn't to never feel anger. Feelings arrive uninvited. That was obvious even to the Stoics. His advice was to never act during the first wave of it. He recommended a specific technique: when anger rises, delay your response, even briefly. Count, breathe, walk away if needed. Not to suppress the emotion, but to let the initial flood, which neuroscience now confirms typically peaks and begins subsiding within about 90 seconds, pass through before you speak or act on it. This maps almost exactly onto what modern neuroscience calls the amygdala hijack, a surge of activity in the brain's threat response center that temporarily overrides the slower, more reasoned prefrontal cortex. In that 90-second window, people say things they don't mean, send messages they'll regret, make decisions from the most reactive version of themselves rather than the most considered one. The Stoics didn't have brain scanners. They just had extraordinarily careful self-observation repeated over years, and they arrived at essentially the same conclusion science eventually confirmed. Consider a woman who receives a sharply worded email from a colleague, one that feels dismissive, even disrespectful. Her fingers are already moving toward an equally sharp reply within seconds. But she pauses, genuinely pauses, closes the laptop, makes tea. 15 minutes later, she rereads the email and notices something she missed the first time. It wasn't cruel, just rushed, written by someone clearly overwhelmed. The reply she eventually sends is calm, clear, and effective. The reply she almost sent would have started a conflict that never needed to exist. This single pause, Seneca's small, unglamorous habit of simply waiting before reacting, has likely saved more relationships, more careers, and more friendships throughout history than almost any other single piece of advice ever given. The practical action: the next time you feel a genuine spike of anger today, commit in advance to a 90-second rule. No replying, no confronting, no deciding anything until 90 seconds have passed. Breathe through it. Let the first wave crest and fall. Then, and only then, choose your response from a clearer mind. What Marcus Aurelius discovered next may surprise you, because it isn't about controlling your reactions at all. It's about controlling something most people never think to examine: the actual size of their wants. Notch Mahler. Habit 8. Shrink your wants until your life feels large again. There's a mathematical trick hidden inside Stoic philosophy that almost nobody notices at first glance. Happiness, in a rough sense, can be thought of as what you have divided by what you want. Most self-improvement advice attacks this equation from one direction only: get more, earn more, acquire more, growing the numerator. The Stoics attacked it from the other side entirely: shrink the denominator, and the same amount of having suddenly produces a far larger result. Epictetus put it with characteristic bluntness: wealth doesn't come from increasing your possessions, but from decreasing your desires. This isn't a rejection of ambition or comfort. Stoics like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius both lived, at times, in genuine luxury. The point isn't that wanting things is wrong. The point is that an endless, unexamined appetite for more will outrun any amount of acquisition you're capable of forever, because desire expands to fill whatever space success creates for it. This is hedonic adaptation again, wearing a different mask. The same mechanism from Habit 1, now applied specifically to material wants. Researchers studying lottery winners found something almost identical to what Seneca predicted 2,000 years earlier. After the initial spike, most winners' baseline happiness returns to roughly where it started, sometimes within about a year. The new house becomes the normal house. The new car becomes just a car. The nervous system resets and the hunt for more quietly resumes, often at a higher, more expensive altitude than before. Picture a family who upgrades their home expecting a larger space to finally deliver the contentment the smaller one never quite provided. 6 months later, the new house is simply where they live, indistinguishable in feeling from the old one, except now there's a bigger mortgage attached to it. Compare that to a family who instead spends one evening consciously naming what they'd be genuinely fine living without. The streaming subscriptions barely used, the clutter of things bought and forgotten, the vague sense that they need a bigger place at all. That second family, paradoxically, often reports feeling wealthier despite owning less, simply because the gap between what they have and what they want has narrowed. The practical action: pick one desire you've been chasing that hasn't actually been examined in a while, a purchase, an upgrade, a status symbol. Ask honestly, would I be completely fine, genuinely fine without this? Not deprived, fine. Often, simply asking the question loosens the desire's grip, even if you still choose to pursue it afterward. Because now you're choosing it freely, instead of being pulled by it unconsciously. This habit quietly makes your entire life feel roomier without a single external thing changing. But wants aren't the only invisible force shaping your happiness. There's a deeper current running underneath all of them, the story you tell yourself about who you actually are. And that's where the 9th habit begins. Notch Moryi, to me 10:9. Let your ashes define you, not your circumstance. When Epictetus taught his students, he returned constantly to a single distinction. You are not your body, your reputation, your job title, or your bank balance. You are your choices. Everything else, he insisted, is simply material you've been handed to work with, and the only thing that actually belongs to you is what you do with that material. This might be the single hardest Stoic habit to build, because modern life is engineered, almost relentlessly, to make you locate your identity in exactly the things Epictetus warned against: your job title on a profile, your follower count, your possessions on display. Every one of these is external material, subject to change without your permission. And if your entire sense of self is built on top of them, every fluctuation in circumstance becomes a small earthquake in your identity. Psychologists studying identity and self-concept have found something the Stoics intuited without any research budget at all. People whose self-worth is tied primarily to internal, values-based traits. Honesty, effort, kindness, discipline, show far more stable well-being across life's ups and downs than people whose self-worth depends on external, fluctuating markers like status or appearance. The internal foundation simply doesn't crack the same way when the wind changes. Consider two employees who both get laid off in the same round of cuts. The first had quietly built his entire identity around his title. I am a director. The layoff doesn't just cost him income, it costs him, in his own mind, a piece of who he is. The second employee had built her identity around being someone who works with integrity and cares about doing things well, regardless of title. The layoff costs her income too, genuinely difficult, genuinely stressful, but it doesn't touch who she actually is, because who she actually is was never stored in the job title to begin with. This is, in many ways, the philosophical foundation the entire rest of this list rests on. Every previous habit, imagining loss, focusing on what's controllable, reflecting honestly, embracing discomfort, reframing obstacles, practicing gratitude, pausing before anger, shrinking desire, all of it is training you toward the same destination, an identity rooted in your own character rather than in circumstances that were never fully yours to hold on to anyway. The practical action. Today, notice one moment where you're tempted to define yourself by an external result. a compliment, a criticism, a win, a setback. Gently redirect the thought towards your actual choice in that moment instead. Not, I am successful or I am a failure, but I chose to act with care or I chose to keep trying. Let your character, not your circumstances, be the thing you point to when you ask yourself who you are. The final habit is the one that quietly transforms your entire life, and fittingly, it's the one the Stoics considered so important that Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man on earth, kept a single reminder of it close by every single day of his reign. 4:10 Remember that today is not gore need. There's a story, likely embellished over centuries but philosophically consistent with everything we know about Roman triumphs, that a servant would stand behind a victorious general during his parade through the city, whispering into his ear the entire time, "Remember, you are mortal." At the height of glory, in front of cheering crowds, someone was assigned specifically to whisper the one truth that glory tends to make people forget. The Stoics called this practice memento mori, remember you will die. It sounds on the surface like the darkest item on this entire list. In truth, it's the one that makes every other habit urgent instead of theoretical. Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself constantly about the shortness of life, not to frighten himself into paralysis, but to burn away the trivial irritations that fill up unexamined days. You cannot afford to waste a decade holding a grudge, he reasoned, if you genuinely accept that your remaining time is unknown and finite. This isn't morbid, it's clarifying. Psychologists studying terror management theory and, separately, people who've survived near-death experiences consistently find the same pattern. An honest confrontation with mortality tends to sharpen gratitude, deepen relationships, and strip away a remarkable amount of the anxious clutter people normally spend their limited energy on. Nearly every person who has survived a serious health scare describes the same shift afterward. Suddenly, the argument that felt unforgivable last week seems small. The work email that felt urgent seems small. What remains large is time with people they love, and the choice to actually be present for it. You don't need a health scare to access this clarity. You can borrow it right now, deliberately, the way the Stoics did every single day. Picture someone lying awake at 2 a.m., mentally rehearsing an argument they're determined to win, certain they have all the time in the world to eventually make peace. Now picture that same person consciously remembering that peace delayed is never actually guaranteed to arrive, that the person on the other side of that grudge and they themselves are both mortal, both temporary, both running on a clock neither of them can see. Suddenly, winning the argument matters far less than simply calling them tomorrow. The practical action and the final one on this list, tonight before you sleep, ask yourself a single honest question. If this were one of my last days, is this how I'd want to have spent it? You don't need the answer to be yes every single time. You just need to keep asking, because the question itself, repeated daily, has a way of gently steering an entire life back toward what actually matters. Conclusion: 10 habits. None of them require wealth. None of them require permission from anyone else. A slave who owned nothing built one of history's most respected schools of thought using exactly these tools. An emperor who owned everything used the same tools every single night by candlelight. Because he understood something worth remembering, circumstances never gave either of them peace. Their daily choices did. If you've made it this far, you already know that lasting happiness was never going to arrive on the back of the next promotion, the next relationship, the next purchase that finally, this time, feels like enough. It was never going to be handed to you by luck or perfect circumstances, because circumstances were never designed to hold something that heavy. Lasting happiness is built the same way a callus is built, the same way strength is built, through small, unglamorous, repeated choices that nobody applauds and that compound quietly over months and years into something that finally, unmistakably, feels like a settled kind of peace. You don't need all 10 habits today. Pick one. Practice it until it's no longer a decision but simply who you are. Then pick another. This is exactly how Marcus Aurelius built an emperor's composure, and exactly how Epictetus built a free mind inside circumstances that offered him no freedom at all. If this lesson is helping you see your life differently, consider subscribing to Stoic Forge Explained for more timeless Stoic wisdom every week. This channel exists entirely to help you build a mind that no circumstance can shake. And before you go, I'd genuinely love to know, which of these 10 habits do you most need to start tomorrow? Leave it in the comments. I read every one, and your answer might be exactly what someone else scrolling through needs to read today too. If this found you at the right moment, a like helps this reach the next person who needs it. Somewhere right now, someone is still standing in that house he spent 20 years building, waiting for the marble floors to finally make him feel something. You don't have to wait for a house like that. You already have everything Marcus Aurelius, Seneca, and Epictetus insisted was actually necessary for a happy life. A mind capable of choosing today, right now, how to meet whatever comes next. That choice was always the whole point. Make it today.